Guys, if you're struggling with Hydra, I can help you. This video is for you because we are going to be taking the top Hydra epics in every single faction, guys, so that you know your options when you're building your very first Hydra team or whatever kind of Hydra team it is for you. Hold up. Click the link in the description below right now to get a free legendary champion, Bambus 4-leaf, as well as one amazing free epic as you level up. Here are the exact steps you need to follow. 1. Log out of Plarium Play on your PC. If you've never had Raid installed on your mobile phone before, the link will work there too. 2. Click the link in the description and start a brand new Raid Shadow Legends account with a brand new email. 3. Launch Raid and complete your tutorial. 4. You can find Bambus 4-leaf here as well as Ugo at level 15. This is an amazing account start in Raid Shadow Legends, so be sure to use my link in the description below right now. We're going to get right started here with the Banner Lords, and the Banner Lords have a couple really good epics for Hydra, right? Archmage Helmet here deserves a shout out. Ursula, the Mourner here deserves a shout out. Potentially Giscard, right? Giscard here, he's got a provoke on an AoE. He's got increased defense and increased attack, right? He deserves a shout out as well. But the title of the day goes to Mr. Stag Knight here. Stag Knight attacks one enemy 2 times, double hit on the A1. Each hit has a 30% boost to a 50% chance of placing decreased speed for 2 turns. On the A2 here, attacks all enemies, 70% chance boosts to a 100% chance of placing decreased attack and decreased defense for 2 turns. Very solid. A couple of the epics we are going to be listing today have both of these essential debuffs, decreased defense and decreased attack. Then on the passive, increase accuracy on an ally for 1 turn each time the ally has a debuff resisted by an enemy. But really what we want here are his debuffs of the decreased speed and the decreased defense with the decreased attack. Of course, Stag Knight, super solid champion, super accessible, spirit affinity epic. All right, let's move on to the High Elves here. Now, the High Elves also have a couple really good champions, right? We've got Tayrel here. He's got an AoE decreased defense with sleep, but sleep doesn't work on Hydra heads, right? He's got a decreased attack A1, pretty solid. Who else? Skaramis here, he's got a provoke, right? 70% chance books to 100% chance of provoke with counterattack and continuous heal on himself. But the prize of the day goes to a damage dealer, Royal Guard, right? Royal Guard attacks 4 times at random on the A3 here, with a 60 books to 75% chance of placing decreased speed for 2 turns. Each hit also has a 60% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 25%. Not very good in Hydra because the heads are immune to turn meter reduction, except from decapitating the head of Mischief, but really, really good for Fire Knight, right? Really solid for Fire Knight, both decreased speed and turn meter reduction on a quad hitter. That is just fantastic. On the A2 here, attacks all enemies. Damage increases according to enemy max HP. Damage based on enemy max HP on a 4-turn cooldown. Guys, this is a super, super solid smack, right? Very good champion, very good debuffer, honestly, for Hydra. Then his A1 has a 50% chance, books to 75% chance of placing decreased defense. So decreased defense, decreased speed also to keep it up on people, and then a max HP nuke. Guys, this guy hits super hard and can do tons of damage even in Nightmare Hydra. All right, moving on to the Sacred Order, right? Again, a couple really, really good shout-outs. I'd like to give a shout-out to Sanguinia here, who has a full cleanse, and then she has block debuffs with continuous heal, right? But, you know, I gotta say Deacon Armstrong, right? With the decreased defense, right? And then the turn meter fill with the turn meter pushback, and then the A1 leech. He deserves a shout out as well. And I'm trying to stay away from void epics, but I gotta choose a void epic. It's gonna be Inquisitor Shamael. And the reason I gotta choose Inquisitor Shamael is because he is a fantastic counter to the Head of Torment because of this passive. Each critical hit fills the champion's turn meter by 7.5%. Whenever an ally receives a fear or true fear debuff from an enemy, this skill will instantly remove the debuff and fill the team leader's turn meter by 15%. So he's going to use his A1 every time an ally receives a fear. He's going to be instantly removing it. So this guy can pump out damage, guys. He can pump out damage. Let's take a look at the rest of his kit, though. On the A1, attacks one enemy, 50% chance of decreasing the duration of a random buff on the target by 1 turn. Every time an enemy places a debuff on an ally, uses this skill against that enemy, These counterattacks will only deal 50% of the normal damage and cannot be critical. If there are multiple champions in the team with this skill, only one champion's counterattack will activate. All right, then on the A2 here, attacks one enemy 3 times, will ignore 25% of the target's defense. Fantastic. Will ignore a further 25% of the target's defense for each buff on this champion. Places a True Fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn if this attack kills an enemy. Fantastic skill. Can deal pure damage, right, if he's under 3 buffs. Super cool champion. Inquisitor Shamail, love him. All right, moving on to Barbarians. Barbarians have a lot of really bad epics, but one thing that is absolutely essential for Hydra is an ally attack, and Farrakhan the Fat is one of the best epic ally attackers in the entire game, because on his A3 here, he places increased crit rate and increased crit damage on all allies except this champion for 3 turns. Then all allies except this champion will attack 1 target enemy on a 4-turn cooldown, which is what you want from an ally attack. He also has HP burn and 2 poisons on his A2, and then he has a decreased defense on the A1 here. Then his passive is kind of weird. Deflects 20% of all incoming damage this champion receives onto all allies. The damage will be spread equally across all allies, so he kind of makes your team less tanky. But he is really good because of this ally attack with increased crit rate and increased crit damage. Farrakhan the Fat, there aren't really any other shoutouts in this faction, not really any other options in this faction. Really, Farrakhan the Fat is the only one who does anything kind of solid for Hydra. All right, for the Ogren here, Ugo is going to be the pick. Ugo has a removes all heal reduction debuffs from all allies, then removes 1 random debuff from all allies, then heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. If all allies are dead, revives them with 50% HP, then fills their turn meter by 50% instead. That's on a 4-turn cooldown, guys. Heal reduction is a debuff you will encounter when fighting the Hydra, so having a guaranteed cleanse for that is super nice. You can also save this for when your entire team is feared by the Head of Torment. On her passive here, it places increased speed and block damage on this champion for 1 turn whenever this champion's last living ally is killed. Her A1 carries a leech. It's kind of a low chance at a leech, but it's still a leech. But then this A2 here is what her claim to fame is. Maelstrom Rack on a 3-turn cooldown. Attacks all enemies. 75% chance books to a 100% chance of placing a decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Also has a 50% chance of placing block buffs for 2 turns. The chance of placing the block buffs debuff increases by 5% for each alive enemy. Honestly, this does more work than it sounds like. Pretty much always going to get that block buffs. Pretty much always going to get that decreased defense as long as she doesn't weak hit. Pretty darn good. I have to say from Ugo, nice AoE drop defense on a 3-turn cooldown. Nice AoE block buffs. All right, guys, for Lizardmen. Lizardmen is kind of weird. Honestly, there are a couple options here, right? There is Aox, because of Aox's passive here, increases the duration of 2 random debuffs on the attacker by 1 turn when attacked, occurs once per hit, right? He has a poison on the A1. Honestly, though, not super great. You could give a shout out to Jizo here. He attacks 1 enemy with a provoke and continuous heal. The provoke is for 2 turns, which is really nice. Against the head, I think it's the Head of Decay that can be provoked. So Jizo definitely deserves a shout out. But the one I'm going to be going with today is Skathix. So Skathix here comes in, and he's got a 50% chance booked on his A1 of placing decreased speed. Then his A2 comes in with a 100% chance of stealing a random buff from each enemy, which is fantastic against Hydra because they put out ally protection and reflect damage or whatever else the Head of Mischief is spreading around. Then he has a full cleanse on a 4-turn cooldown with block, debuffs, and shield. Right, the shield is equal to 20% of his max HP, so you can build to make it absolutely tanky, right? So block debuffs for 2 turns and shield on a full cleanse is fantastic. Then his passive here is kind of odd. Places block damage on this champion for 1 turn whenever their HP drops below 30%. So Skathix here is going to be my pick. He is a fantastic Void epic. Again, trying to stay away from the Voids, but the Lizardmen don't really have good epics in general outside of Venomage and Aox, right? And neither of those are going to be great for Hydra. So we're going to go with Skathix as our Lizardman pick. Guys, for Skinwalkers, my pick here is going to be a Kemptum. On his A1, he's bringing poisons, right? Then he has a debuff spread on his A1, taking 1 random debuff from the target, placing it on all enemies. So if some of your debuffs are falling off or whatever, you can just spread them back using a Kemptum's A1. Pretty handy for niche situations, right? Then he has an AoE that attacks all enemies 3 times here on the A2. Each hit has a 60% chance of increasing the duration of any hex debuffs on enemies by 1 turn. If enemies are not under a hex debuff, each hit has a 60% chance of placing a hex debuff for 2 turns, so he basically has an AoE hex here. That's on a 3-turn cooldown, fully booked, right? Books up to a 75% chance. Of course, you can increase that to an 80% chance with a Sniper Mastery. Then on his passive here, he has an 80% chance, books to a 100% chance of inflicting damage from 1 poison debuffs to enemies under hex debuff whenever their allies receive damage from poison debuffs. So he's going to be debuff spreading, damage spreading, and he has an AoE hex, so you can deal with the Head of Mischief. He's also coming in with speed in all battles by 18%. So if you lack a speed aura, you can use Mr. Akemptum here to make up for that as well. Moving into orcs. Now, orcs really have a couple good epics, right? Ultimate Gaelic smacks hard and he carries burns, right? And Zargala has an AoE drop defense here, but there are really 2 that take the spotlight, and that's going to be Takeover and also Duke the Pierce. Now, there was some debate when I was making this list about which I should pick, but I'm honestly going to go with Duke the Pierce. On his A1, he has a double hit with decreased accuracy. On his A2, he attacks all enemies, AoE hit, with a 100% chance booked of placing decreased attack for 2 turns. He'll also place a decreased defense for 2 turns on each critical hit. You do want to build him with 100% crit rates. All right, then the A3 here places a provoke for 1 turn on the target enemy. Great for the Head of Decay. Also has a 75% chance of placing provoke for 1 turn on 2 random enemies. Places reflect damage on this champion for 2 turns and an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn. The extra buffs that he gets will make him a target for the Head of Mischief, which means you need to build this guy with resistance. Now, he doesn't need much. I think he only needs like 400 resistance or something. But when you're building, you know, for speed and 100% crit rate and also accuracy needed to land these debuffs, he is a bit stat hungry, right? If you can get that kind of build pulled off, he's fantastic, right? He's going to be mischief tanking for you. He's going to be doing your drop defense, your decrease attack, your decrease accuracy, your provoke. He fills so many roles on the team, but he is super, super stat hungry. You need to build like 4 stats, right? Speed, crit rate, resistance, and accuracy. And then he needs to be tanky enough to survive. And as far as an epic goes, this guy will do a lot. So as far as demon spawn are concerned, there aren't many. You know, you could choose one of the damage dealers like Gorlos. Vildrax has an AoE hex, which is really nice. He attacks all enemies, 100% chance booked of increasing the duration of all enemy debuffs by 1 turn. So he's not bad for Hydra at all. His A1 has a leech, and then his passive here, 10% chance of stealing the heal each time an enemy under a hex is about to be healed. Doesn't work against bosses though. So he does have an AoE hex, which is kind of nice. If you need him, he can be used. But honestly, I'm going to go with Dur the Hungerer. He has a revives 2 random allies with 50% HP, then fills their turn meters by 50%. So that's a really nice revive on a 4-turn cooldown. His A2 here, reflect damage on everyone and continuous heal on everyone, then heals all allies by 15% of their max HP. And his A1 has a stun, which you don't really need at all for Hydra. But, you know, nice little healer, nice little reviver. Honestly, Demon Spawn doesn't have that great of epics for Hydra. Moving on to Undead Hordes, it's Husk. Husk is really good for a lot of the same reasons. Royal Guard is really good from the High Elves. His A1 carries a 40% chance of placing a provoke for 1 turn, so he can be your provoker, right? His A2 attacks all enemies with a stun. Damage inflicted is proportional to enemy max HP. Very, very solid skill. All right, then he attacks 1 enemy on the A3. Damage increases according to this champion's current HP. Honestly, build him with crit rate and crit damage, and then some accuracy for the provoke and some speed, and he'll be right where he needs to be. All right, for Dark Elves here. For Dark Elves, I would choose Ryan the Conjurer, but he's a Doom Tower champion. He can't be pulled from shards. He's got a buff removal. He's got a weaken. He's got a revive, really good revive, actually, which is fantastic. But he is a Doom Tower champion, so not as accessible. Madame Ceres, though, can be pulled from a shard, right? She's got a buff strip like Ryan with decreased attack and decreased defense. Guys, so many of these epics are carrying decreased attack and decreased defense. Then she has an AoE with block debuffs on all allies for 2 turns if any buff is stolen, right? She has a chance of stealing a buff. And then she has True Fear, which doesn't really matter in Hydra. The A1 attacks 1 enemy, 20% chance of placing Fear for 1 turn. Chance increases to 30% if the target's under a debuff. Not really good in Hydra because you can't crowd control the Hydra. Then on her passive here, places a shield on this champion equal to 10% of their max HP at the start of each turn. When attacked while under a shield buff, has a 35% chance of placing a fear debuff on the attacker for 1 turn. Pretty good. She's going to be protecting herself, keeping herself nice and topped off on HP and everything else. All right, moving on to Knight's Revenant. There's really only one here, but we can give a couple of honorable mentions, right? One goes to Dawncaller Sabbatha, right? Dawncaller Sabbatha, A1 heal, right? Increase defense, increase attack on everyone on an AoE, which is really good. That's on a 3-turn cooldown, and then a revive with 25% HP and 100% turn meter, which is super sweet, with block damage for 2 turns. Whenever this champion revives an ally, decreases the cooldown of one of the champion skills by 1 turn on the passive, right? We can also go with Whisper, right? Whisper is a phenomenal damage dealer for Hydra, and honestly, we don't have many damage dealers on this list outside of enemy max HP nukers, so if you've got your Whisper, this probably is the key for you to do big damage in Hydra. Her A1 has a weaken, her A2 has increased attack and increased crit rate. If attacking a target that has higher max HP than this champion, will ignore defense if the target is under weaken, so will deal pure damage, right? She only needs to be built with 70% crit rate because she's going to bring her own increased crit rate. Then she has a double hitter, grants an extra turn if the target is under decreased defense and weaken, then has a 10% chance of granting an extra turn whenever this champion lands a critical hit, increases the damage inflicted on bosses by 20%. So she's just going to be proccing extra turns all over the place, getting really, really good damage from all this single target nukage, potentially pure damage on the A2 here. Whisper is an absolute fantastic close second to the champion we're going to pick, which is Rector Droth, guys. Rector Droth coming in here with decreased attack on the A1, then on her A2, heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. After healing, places Perfect Veil for 2 turns on all allies with full HP, places a 15% continuous heal for 1 turn instead on all allies with less than 100% HP. All right, then she has a Revive with 60% HP and fills their turn meter by 60%, places a Perfect Veil buff on them for 3 turns, run her with the Journal of Necrodos because that'll just boost this turn meter fill. Then she's going to revive them with Perfect Veil. Then on the passive here, whenever an ally under Veil or Perfect Veil gets a turn, heals them by 10% of their max HP. Also increases the resistance of allies under Veil or Perfect Veil by 50. We know how good, Syl is and Elva is and Sifi is. Well, if you don't have any of those, Rector Droth is a good other option, a good epic option, very affordable champion. A lot of you guys have her. Guys, use your Rector Droth. All right, for dwarves. For dwarves, there are a couple good options. Again, Morag deserves a shout out. AoE Strengthen, right? Teams up with 2 random allies, right? Counterattacks when hit while under Strengthen, and then she ignores shields on her A1. But really, I mean, it's just got to go to the epic dwarf we all love the most, and that is Geomancer. On the A1, attacks all enemies, so he's a great candidate for a Provoke set or a Hex set with a decreased accuracy. The A2 has a single target buff strip, then attacks them, steals all buffs if the target's under HP burn placed by this champion, and then reduces the cooldown of the A3 if he kills someone while under an HP burn placed by himself. For Hydra, mostly what you care about is it's a buff strip. On his A3 here, fully depletes the target's turn meter, fills the champion's turn meter by the amount the target loses. He also carries a burn and a weaken on this skill. It is on a single target, but the reason this is so good is because of the passive, and I say this every single time I talk about Geomancer, right? Decreases the damage all allies receive by 15% and deflects that damage onto each enemy under an HP burn debuff placed by this champion. If there are multiple champions on the team with this skill, only one will activate. So he's just going to do a full AoE damage reduction and then deflect all that damage he just reduced back onto whatever Hydra had just attacked. Whenever this champion is attacked, which will happen often, deflects 30% of the damage instead. When deflecting damage on each enemy hit, has a 30% chance of dealing additional damage equal to 3% of the target's max HP. Guys, basically, he's just going to sit there and tank hits and chop down Hydra heads while they are under a burn placed by him. That is on a 3-turn cooldown, so you can get multiple heads under it at the same time. He's a very, very good damage-dealing champion, especially early on in Hydra. All right, guys, now we have the Shadowkin. The Shadowkin also have some pretty good epics. I think Asamoto could be pretty good. He's got increased defense with a turn meter fill. He's got an AoE decrease attack. I got an honorable mention Taragi the Frog with shields and ally protection, right? He heals himself. He's got an AoE provoke. It's not a 100% chance to land, but it is a AoE provoke and an A1 decrease attack. Then he's got a poison on his passive whenever he's hit. But it's really got to go to Oboro here. Now, Oboro attacks one enemy with a books to 50% chance of placing decreased defense for 2 turns. Will attack all enemies instead if the target is under 4 or more debuffs. If you guys have seen any of my videos with the cat, right? The cat has an AoE A1 as well, conditionally, just like Oboro, but he absolutely just pumps out the damage. Team her with a Lady Mikage, and you're just going to be absolutely smacking the heck out of Hydra. Right, the rest of her kit is single target damage, so attacks one enemy 2 times. Second hit has a 75% chance of transferring all debuffs from this champion to the target. First hit has a 75% chance of stealing all buffs from the target when attacking under Veil or Perfect Veil. Places increased crit rate and increased crit damage on this champion for 2 turns on the A3, then attacks one enemy. Places a Perfect Veil buff on this champion for 2 turns if this attack is critical. So she's gonna just put a Veil on herself because you want to build all your damage dealers with 100% crit rate. Then on the passive here, places a Revive on Death buff on the champion for 3 turns whenever they receive Veil or Perfect Veil, which is going to happen whenever they use the A3. That's on a 3-turn cooldown, so basically every 3 turns, she'll keep herself under Perfect Veil. Very, very nice. Running her with Mikage to get those ally attacks off the A1. Mikage attacks one enemy with one random ally from the Shadowkin faction. The ally joining the attack will use their default skill. If you've got your Oboro there, she'll just pump out AoE nukes, and there you go. Your damage is solved permanently for Hydra. All right, then on the Sylvan Watchers, again, there are a couple good options here. I like Dudan the Runic. He has Taunt, Strengthen, and Counterattack on himself, which is really important because his A1 has a 60% chance of removing a random debuff from all allies, which is fantastic. He has an AoE with a shield equal to 15% of this champion's max HP, increases the duration of all buffs on all allies by 1 turn. But the prize of the show goes to White Dryad Naya. How could it go to anyone else? The budget Yumiko for the Trunda teams, guys, on the A3. Ally protection on everyone with a Strengthen, small version of Strengthen, granted, but 15% Strengthen on all allies for 2 turns. That's a fantastic protection skill. That adds up to a total of 65% damage mitigation. Then she has a single target cleanse, heals them by 40% of their max HP. If the target of this skill is not this champion, decreases the cooldown of all the target's skills by 2 turns. She's just got almost a full reset, honestly, because these days a lot of champions have like a 3-turn cooldown. So by the time they get another turn, their active skills will all be back. It's a fantastic reset ability. Then attacks all enemies with a decreased speed. That actually books to a decent chance at 50% chance of decreased speed on an A1. Decreased speed is a debuff you definitely want to have for Hydra, so definitely be bringing your White Dryad Naya into your Hydra teams for this reset. Obviously, the reset target of reset targets is going to be Trunda, so very, very good on the Trunda teams. And then on her passive here, whenever this champion is healed, heals each ally except this champion's by 20% of that heal. Very awesome. You know, you can just run 2 of them at the same time, right? One resets the damage dealer, the Trunda, for example. The other resets the other White Dryad Naya. Then that White Dryad Naya resets the other White Dryad Naya, which resets the Trunda. Yeah, it's a whole loop, right? It's a whole loop, and it's absolutely awesome. So guys, what do you think of my epics? Do you have any of these epics? Anyone you hadn't considered before? Definitely build all of these guys to 6 stars, level them, put their ascensions in, put them in some of your best gear, because these epics will get you more damage on Hydra. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I have been Felris, sailing the seas of Raid Shadow Legends. I hope you all have a absolute wonderful day. I will see you in another video.